Candace, or the Kandake, is not her name. It's her title, one that one might translate as the Queen of the Ethiopians, as Luke does in the book of Acts, which is the only place where she is mentioned in the Bible. She's the ruler who has in charge of her treasury a eunuch who at least once went up to Jerusalem for worship and returned reading the scroll of Isaiah the prophet, learned about Jesus from Philip, and was baptized. We can only assume that he returned home, bringing Christianity with him to Ethiopia and to his queen. But queen isn't quite the right word. It's close, it's a translation. But English speakers hear queen and think the king's wife, whereas Candace, or the Kandake, was more likely the title for the king's sister and mother to the heir to the throne, because the Ethiopians followed a matrilineal succession. Maybe Queen Mother would be a more accurate translation, but English speakers hear that and think the king's mom. But Candace, or the Kandake, was more than just that, because she had her own court, her own land, her own role in government, and her own treasury with her own ethnically Ethiopian but religiously Jewish Christian eunuch in charge of it. Translation is tricky. And translating titles is trickier still, because rarely ever are there words that are exact translations for their counterparts in other languages, and because jobs and titles that seem to correspond never do so exactly. So, do you have to use more words to convey the nuance of the title? Or do you just punt, as English so often does, and just bring the word over, transliterate it rather than translate it, and maybe throw in a translational explanation that highlights what it is that you've done and absolves you of the burden of interpretation, like Luke saying Candace, or the Kandake, which means Queen of the Ethiopians. Or like pastor, which means shepherd, even though neither of those tell you exactly what it is that I do. Or like Christ, which means anointed one, but what does that mean? Or like Christian, which means little Christ, but you get it. Titles are shortcuts. Actually, all words are, it's only a question of type. Titles quickly signal to you what level of respect you should have for someone, what job they have, their gender, their level of education, something about them that you could learn eventually by getting to know them, but neither you nor they have the time. So, doctor, professor, Mrs., dame, pastor, Christian, or even Candace, or the Kandake. And for Candace, or the Kandake, all we get is the shortcut. All we get is the title, and that only as a sliver of the context for the story that God wants to tell. But what does that sliver of context add to the story? Maybe we can't find an exact equivalent for her title, but her title is there to tell us why her servant was important and wealthy enough to take a chariot to Jerusalem for worship and read a scroll on the way home. Maybe we don't know what she did or how she lived, but her title is there to tell us that she lived and did things, and that those unnamed things and that undescribed life impacted the story of salvation in a sliver of a way, and were also impacted by it. Maybe we can't know everything or even anything about who she was, but her title is there to show that even being peripheral to God's story means being a part of it, so that no one is peripheral to the story. Not really, neither queens nor servants, not doctors nor their patients, not professors nor students, not misses or their misters. The shortcut that is the word person means, to those who are paying attention, someone for whom Jesus died, someone for whom Jesus lives, someone for whom God has a story to tell that will impact their life, whether they believe it or not. But if they believe it, the impact, well, it's hard to put into words. Candace, or the Kandake, which means Queen of the Ethiopians, was at least one person who had at least one servant who was baptized after reading Isaiah and went home bringing Christianity with him to her. Beyond that, we don't exactly know. But I'm going to assume, entirely because I want to, that Candace or the Kandake either got a new title or already had it. Christian, which means one who trusts in Jesus our King. You and I are dust and breath, loved by God, bought by Jesus. This podcast is written and produced by me, Ethan Cherney, a pastor at Bethel Lutheran Church in Menasha, Wisconsin, member of the Wisconsin Evangelical Lutheran Synod. Outro music arranged and performed by Mr. Peter Shawy, who is like doves to their nests. Keep in touch. Reach out to us on Twitter or Facebook at Dust and Breath Pod, or send an email to dustandbreathpod@gmail.com. Or you could write us a review, recommend a episode to somebody else. That's the only way other people find out about the show. Now go, do what God called you to do, be who God made you to be, see what God can do with dust and breath and faith in Jesus, his Son.